Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and The Sun's editor-at-large, Harry Cole. And it's the last one after 5 years, because you're heading away, aren't you? That's right.
5 years, though, eh?
5 years. Who knew? Where'd time go? I know.
During the pandemic, when you're sitting at home, pyjamas from waist down, in front of our iPads.
A glass of cocoa at the ready. Yeah, I know.
Or wine,
well, anyway, it's been fabulous to have you as a partnership. So thank you very much indeed. So let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? Kicking off with the Financial Times. Watering down the government's welfare changes will cost taxpayers £2.5 billion and still push 150,000 people into poverty. That is the lead story for the FT. That story also on the front of the Eye. It says the Prime Minister faces his biggest rebellion yet, with dozens of MPs defying him over the benefits cut. While the Daily Mail says that rebel MPs are set to humiliate Sir Keir Starmer after his attempts to win over welfare bill critics fell flat. It's also the lead for The Guardian, which says there's a brinkmanship between MPs and the government over the scale of the concessions. And on the front of The Express reports that BBC boss Tim Davie has been told to sack those responsible or resign himself over the Glastonbury IDF chant scandal. The Telegraph revealing the BBC Director-General was at Glastonbury when Bob Villan chanted death, death to the IDF, and was personally consulted over what to do about the performance. A coroner has ruled that drag race star The Vivian died of cardiorespiratory arrest due to ketamine use. That is the lead story for the Metro. The Sun leading with a crackdown by the police on delivery drivers as a result of their story. And on the front of the Daily Star, the warning from forecasters that things are about to get even hotter with record-breaking temperatures on their way in July. So let's get the thoughts of Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. Pippa, we're starting with your paper, your byline as well, on the welfare reform. What is going to happen tomorrow when it comes to Parliament, and how much of a bloody nose will be given to Sir Keir Starmer and his team behind this?
We don't yet know the exact numbers, and there was some speculation earlier today that it might actually be a case of the rebellion starting to mount again. But I think now, tonight, we can see that what we do know is that that rebellion of 126 Labour MPs last week who signed that wrecking amendment, which means they would bring down the bill at the vote tomorrow night, has, for the most part, faded away. There are still a lot of concerns that people have, but they've generally made decisions to back the bill at second reading and debate them, try and kind of iron out, get answers to their questions before the next big vote, and then potentially could vote against at that stage. Or in some cases, they've decided to abstain. But in the case of about 40 Labour MPs tonight have signed a new amendment tabled by a Labour MP called Rachel Maskell, who has been one of the most vocal critics of the cuts to disability benefits. And it basically would have the same effect as the one last week. It's got a smaller number of rebels attached to it. As I say, currently 40. And when you consider that the government, the rebels would have to reach 83 in order to beat the government's big majority and to defeat the bill, it feels like at this stage the concessions that the government made last week have done their job for now.
I know we've talked about this for weeks, but what is the nuts and bolts of this? Because people say that Starmer's PIP changes means that someone who can't wash their own hair, their private parts, their legs and their feet, and needs assistance to be able to get in or out of a bath or shower will not be entitled to a penny of welfare help. So why are people with disabilities being targeted, which is, fundamentally something you would expect a Labour government to throw support around?
Because there's been a massive increase post-pandemic, post-COVID, to the number of people that are claiming for this. And, some of them have been able to claim for it with a phone assessment, a 5-minute phone interview.
But that's not their fault.
No,
that was the system that was laid out. That's the bit that needs to change.
The problem is that lots of genuine people who need help are being swept up in these changes. They're designed to try and get that bill down, to try and make it a little bit harder to get on there. And now you've ended up with this weird fudge where someone who, say, is diagnosed with dementia today will receive a higher rate of payment because they've basically said to anyone's on it now will not see any cuts to their numbers, to someone who's diagnosed in 2 years' time will get less money. So a completely skewed system, which is why the sort of the fudge and the compromise hasn't quite worked. Now, right back, when was it? Well, a few months ago, Keir Starmer announced a big fanfare of £5 billion worth of reforms. This is, this has all been costed into the spending review, into the spring statement. It's in the numbers. It's yet again another big black hole for Rachel Reeves appeared because, as the FT is saying, this is going to cost £2.5 billion. So that's half. That's more than half of the £4.9 billion they were going to said they were going to save from doing this. Now, in the last week. Last week, Keir Starmer was at NATO. He announced another £40 billion worth of spending every day. You've got massive NHS, budget on course to be sort of 200 billion a year. We're spending more than 120 billion pounds a year just in debt payments. These numbers are stacking up greatly. And what this vote is showing the bond markets, showing the investors in Britain that is actually incapable of taking any form of axe, really, to public spending. And that's going to really, really worry people because government borrowing, the cost of government borrowing, is already higher right now than it was during the Liz Truss fund.
But have they picked the wrong bit of the massive welfare bill to reform? Isn't that the fundamental problem?
The problem is, I think, you have to tackle disability benefits, because disability benefits obviously ranges from the people, as you say, who literally cannot wash, clothe, feed themselves, to people sitting at home saying they've got a bit of backache. So the broadness of this payment
but
is
those people
the issue.
they go on the sick, won't they? That's
sick. PIP is for people in work as well. It's meant to design to help people to be able to work.
It's not a work-related benefit.
No, exactly. But it's designed to be able to help people. A lot of people get to work, additional money. It's been basically, I'd say, it's been pretty candidly dealt with from top to bottom here, because instead of making the case about the moral case of reforming and what they need to do it, they've done it slightly shonkily of going for the numbers quickly.
So it's a little bit like the winter fuel allowance. They've made it seem penny-pinching and mean, and that's possibly not the intention here. Why have the review after the event, effectively?
Well,
which is the other criticism of criticism.
That's one of the big criticisms of it. I listened to that statement from Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, in the Chamber today, and one of the big criticisms from MPs some of whom had signed the previous rebellion amendment and this time are going to back it, nevertheless said that they were concerned about the order of it all. And this is not a new criticism. Throughout the whole process, a lot of Labour MPs feel that the government's got it the wrong way round, that the timing was rushed because Rachel Reeves, ahead of her spring statement, needed to make the books balance. In fact, she went back to the welfare budget and took more from it after the OBR suggested that her fiscal headroom was not as large as she initially thought. And there is an argument that the Stephen Timms review, which is investigating the PIP's payments and the eligibility criteria, there's an argument that should have started immediately when they came in, and that if they'd done it at that point, then they'd reached this point now. But they would be able to continue to, they'd be able to actually make some sort of proper decisions now. And instead, they're in a position where they have, they've got sort of rebels up in arms about it all still. Even those MPs who are planning to vote for it are pretty
angry.
concerned about it.
Annoyed about it.
And it is not just, as Harry says, it's not just raised questions in the markets and their concerns about whether the government going forward are going to be able to sort of tighten budgets should they need to do so. It's also undermined the PM's political authority.
Yeah,
to be a year in with a majority this big and to be facing such a huge rebellion is quite something.
I think there's also a lot of tension that has bubbled, being sort of repressed for the last year. The relationships between Downing Street ministers and the wider party, who feel a little bit unloved, feel a little bit like they've been taken for granted, a little bit like they haven't been consulted. The PM's slightly aloof. All these concerns that we've been saying for ages. The MPs have been saying it very privately behind the scenes for a long time. That has exploded now into the open, and this is sort of almost a catalyst for lots and lots of complaints that people are going. Whether they're actually going to really cripple the government, and it would be unheard of for a majority of 163 we were trying to work out earlier.
165, yeah.
165.
And his biggest rebellion so far has
1
been
year
14
in,
on the planning bill.
On something he says is a flagship mission of his government. So, it's not a happy
And they wanted
birthday
to go
this week.
further, though, as well, didn't they? Because originally the plan was to do these cuts now, ahead of the summer, and then when the Stephen Timms review came back, and when they'd make the case in the autumn for even more cuts, because they felt that that PIP in particular is the biggest in-work benefit. Obviously, pensions are the biggest benefit overall. And so they felt that with it set to hit tens of billions of pounds by the end of the Parliament every year, they felt that they had to deal with that in particular that you mentioned earlier about where else in the welfare budget could they found savings.
Yeah.
You know, this was they felt was the obvious place.
This wasn't even a cut. It was a reduction in the speed of which it's.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a cut. It's not going backwards. Yeah.
The Daily Mail living in hope politically for it anyway. Rebel MPs are set to humiliate the Prime Minister today. Your view is probably not. And we saw the eye as well. One sentence caught my eye. Emboldened welfare rebels now seeking an end to the two-child benefit cap. Well, this is the authority undermining that you talk about. Never mind the
once
bomb
you get a
market.
taste, once they get a taste of it. Look what happened to Boris Johnson's 80-seat majority. Once people get a taste of rebelling, feel like they're actually in control, setting the agenda. And and frankly, a lot of Labour MPs didn't go into politics to take away the benefits. That's just straight up fact.
Also worth saying that Keir Starmer himself has let it be known that he would like to, if he can afford to, scrap the two-child benefit cap. So I think Rachel Reeves must be sitting there, keeping a list of the 2.5 billion that she was expecting to have in the welfare cuts, the 1.6 billion, the 1.6 billion for the winter fuel U-turn, and then potentially, if they go for the full lifting of the two-child benefit cap, that's another couple of billion. She's going to reach the autumn. She's going to have to make the books balance of the budget, and for all they talk about growth, there's no indication that that's going to take place at fast enough a rate to be able to provide the extra cash by the autumn. If anything, the fiscal headroom is tightening.
Yeah.
Where does that leave you when she's got a fiscal rule? She said what she said about borrowing. She said what she said about not wanting more austerity. That leaves you with tax rises.
Yeah.
I think you can see why the Prime Minister it was mooted but hasn't reshuffled his team this side of the summer, because he's got a massive headache coming down the line in the autumn. Then the fact that Rachel Reeves has said she let it be known, to use the Westminster parlance as she's told people, that she will walk before she rips up those fiscal rules. When push comes to shove, that remains the case. But I think her credibility as Chancellor would be rendered zero if she did rip them up and stay. And they've boxed themselves in on taxes. So, there's a crunch coming, and, it seems they seem incapable of being able to cut anywhere. So
politically, this is much bigger than just the issue on the table. And what time do we find out, just quickly? Tomorrow, do you reckon?
About 7 p.m. the votes will start to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Full coverage with Sophie Ridge, obviously, then. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Coming up next, though, with the heatwave set to continue in the UK, the Star writes, "You ain't seen nothing sweat." That and more after the break.
In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Thousands of Russians were drafted. For some, the reality of frontline warfare meant one thing: desertion.
I had a rush of adrenaline. It was a kind of treason.
But they did not escape on their own.
I help people to desert Russian army.
The stakes are high, but for some, there's no other option.
We keep going till Putin's regime is over.
Escaping Putin on Sky News.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
Tel Aviv's skyline and the familiar sounds of an Iranian salvo. This caught some off guard. It's perhaps part of a broader psychological strategy by Iran to make Israel look exposed.
This is the source of Hezbollah's fury. the aftermath of an assassination.
What happens here has the potential to reshape the Middle East. Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview. We are joined once again by the Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and the editor-at-large of The Sun, Harry Cole. And it is to your paper, Harry, we go next. Just next, did somebody say ... Anyway, explain this story. It's about migrants.
The Sun's been looking at this for a couple of weeks or so now of illegal working from migrant hotels. So people arriving on small boats, they're going into migrant hotels, and they're all automatically working for companies, delivery companies, Just Eat included, and Deliveroo, and this is, it's pretty brazen. Our reporters have been down there photographing them. It hasn't taken long to see people who literally who are being housed by the taxpayer, who have no right to work here while they're claiming asylum, and where cases are being dealt with, openly and brazenly working for these firms. And the Home Office, finally now woken up this a little bit. VetKeeper says, I commend the Sun's campaign to shine a spotlight on this, but without being churlish for her excellent quote, that's the sort of thing the Home Office should be doing.
But how are they? How are they working? Do they need to show papers to the employers, for example?
These big delivery firms, really do need to get their houses in order. And I don't know why they haven't been, hauled in by the Prime Minister or hauled in by the the Home Secretary. There's a lot of sharing of accounts, so one person signs up legally for an account, and then that account is shared around various different people. So one bike, one sort of company, one company account being widely used illegally by lots of people. And, this is very, very extremely cheap labour, and I can't imagine they're getting the conditions of that great.
I know you're trying to come in. Do you want to have one sentence?
Just very quickly, Harry says that they should be halted by the Home Office. They were, in fact, today.
Were they? Oh, good.
And Deliveroo, Uber Eats and Just Eat have said, as a result of that, they're going to further strengthen security checks, which up until this point have been voluntary, on delivery riders in the next 3 months to prevent illegal working in the gig economy.
Why on earth was it voluntary? Why were they? These companies are making massive amounts of profit, knowing full well who the people working for them are. They've turned a blind eye for too long. I'm glad they've been hauled in. I like a good hauling in.
Glastonbury, Daily Express and elsewhere in the papers. What's the latest?
Yes, well, I don't know if you watched Glastonbury over the weekend. I picked up snippets of it, but I wasn't sitting down in front of TV watching the whole thing. But had you been tuning into iPlayer and watching it, you might have been shocked by, trying to find the right page here, by the...
Bob Vylan.
Bob Vylan, yes, Bob Vylan, creatively named, who are... a rap punk act. I mean, you might think, if you'd done a Google search on them, that they might be a group that the BBC should have been paying particular care with, given Kneecap wasn't actually screened live because they predicted trouble there. And what happened is that this group, Bob Villan, the lead singer.
Just got a minute. Just
Yeah.
circumvent all of that.
So circumvent all of that. You know what happens.
There's a criminal investigation.
Criminal investigation.
It was on the BBC
Tim
Online.
Davie is under pressure now. He's been told to, as Express says, to sack those responsible, resign himself.
And his exact role in this is getting a little bit murky now because he turns out he was at Glastonbury.
According to the Telegraph
According
tonight,
to the BBC, who confirmed he was there.
Okay, right.
And he was at Glastonbury, and he was consulted about what on earth to do when this, instead of pressing a button and turning it off when this guy started screaming for the murder of Israelis, it might have been they left it up there for 5 hours. So, real questions for Tim Davie tonight, given how much focus was already on Kneecap, who are also under investigation.
See if he's hauled in too, shall we?
I suspect it's more than hauling in,
just very quickly, coverage of the weather.
It's hot.
I Stay Out as SW19 swelters. That is in the Metro. Tennis-loving celebs stayed in the shade. And the Daily Star as well. You ain't seen nothing sweat. Record-breaking summer temperatures on the way. Talking about 40 degrees. Weather forecast to come a bit later on. Harry, Pippa, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your service.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland. We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.